Hi, welcome back, 8th grade. Today we're going to be starting part 2 of the novel Farewell to Manzanar, which brings us up to chapter 12. So if we take a look at our study guide questions that go along with those, I will share them on the screen for you. Chapter 12 has 5 questions. We see question 1 says, in Spanish, what does Manzanar mean? How is this an empty promise for the internment camp residents? And don't worry, the book tells you what it means in Spanish, but we'll cover that in a minute. Question 2, what do the families do with the multicolored linoleum they are given? And what does this show us about these people? 3, how do Papa and Mama spend time while in the camp? 4, did Papa enjoy puttering? Pause for a second there, pudding. So did Papa enjoy puttering around camp, and give reasons for your opinion? And then 5, in what ways does Manzanar have the semblance of a normal world? Semblance meaning it resembled a normal world, although we know that it really was not. All right, so if we turn into our books, we are on part 2. And we're going to turn page 95, starts chapter 12, and the title of the chapter is called Manzanar, USA. So please read along with me. In Spanish, Manzanar means apple orchard. So there's the answer to the first part. Great stretches of Owens Valley were once green with orchards and alfalfa fields. It had been a desert ever since its water started flowing south into Los Angeles, sometime during the 20s, but a few rows of untended pear and apple trees were still growing there when the camp opened, where a shallow water table had kept them alive. In the spring of 1943, we moved to Block 28, right up next to one of the old pear orchards. That's where we stayed until the end of the war. And those trees stand in my memory for the turning of our life in camp, from the outrageous to the tolerable, meaning manageable. Papa pruned and cared for the nearest trees. Late that summer, we picked the fruit green and stored it in a root cellar he had dug under our new barracks. At night, the wind through the leaves would sound like the surf had sounded in Ocean Park. And while drifting off to sleep, I could almost imagine we were still living by the beach. Mama had set up this move. Block 28 was also close to the camp hospital. For the most part, people lived there who had to have easy access to it. Mama's connection was her job as a dietitian. As a whole half of the barracks had fallen empty when another family relocated. Mama hustled us there almost before they snapped their suitcases shut. For all the pain it caused, the loyalty oath finally did speed up the relocation program. One result was a gradual easing of the congestion in the barracks, meaning so many people. A shrewd house hunter like Mama could set things up fairly comfortably, by Manzanar standards, if she kept her eyes open. But you had to move fast. As soon as the word got around that so-and-so had been cleared to leave, there would be a kind of tribal restlessness, a nervous rise in the level of neighborhood gossip as wives jockeyed for positions to see who would get the empty cubicles. In Block 28, we doubled our living space, 4 rooms for the 12 of us. Ray and Woody walled them with sheetrock. We had ceilings this time and linoleum floors of solid maroon. You had 3 colors to choose from: maroon, black, and forest green. And there was plenty of it around by this time. Some families would vie with one another for the most elegant floor designs, obtaining a roll of each color from the supply shed, cutting it into diamonds, squares, or triangles, shining it with heating oil, then leaving their doors open so that passers-by could admire the handiwork. So here's what they're doing with the linoleum. There's plenty of it available. There's 3 different colors, and some of them are choosing to make designs out of it. You know, normally a linoleum, think of a linoleum floor being in the kitchen or the bathroom, and it's that long sheet, you roll it out and it's kind of tacked down, and it's a not very expensive floor that you can have in your home, but it still protects the floor. easy to mop up and wash and that. They, however, though, instead of just rolling out one color, are cutting it up and making designs and then hoping everybody else will admire their handiwork. So that's part of your answer. Papa brought his still with him, so what he's mixing up his concoctions in, when we moved. He set it up behind the door where he continued to brew his own sake and brandy. He wasn't drinking as much now, though. He spent a lot of time outdoors. Like many of the older EC men, he didn't take a regular job in camp. He puttered. He had been working hard for 30 years, and bad as it was for him, in some ways, camp did allow him time to dabble with hobbies he would never have found time for otherwise. Once the first year's turmoil cooled down, the authorities started letting us outside the wire for recreation, outside the barbed wire. So they're not being contained. They can go roam about. Papa used to hike along the creeks that channeled down from the base of the Sierras. He brought back chunks of driftwood, and he would pass long hours sitting on the steps carving myrtle limbs into benches, table legs, and lamps, filling our rooms with bits of gnarled, polished furniture. He hauled stones in off the desert and built a small rock garden outside our doorway with succulents and a patch of moss. Near it, he laid flat stepping stones leading to the stairs. He also painted watercolors. Until this time, I had not known he could paint. He loved to sketch the mountains. If anything made that country habitable, it was the mountains themselves. Purple when the sun dropped, and so sharply etched in the morning light, the granite dazzled almost more than bright snow lacing it. The nearest peaks rose 10,000 feet higher than the valley floor, with Whitney, the highest, just off to the south. They were important for all of us, but especially for the EC. Whitney reminded Papa of Fujiyama. That is, it gave him the same kind of spiritual sustenance. The tremendous beauty of those peaks was inspirational, as so many natural forms are to the Japanese. The rocks outside our doorway could be those mountaintops or mountains in miniature. They also represented those forces in nature, those powerful and inevitable forces that cannot be resisted, reminding a man that sometimes he must simply endure that which he cannot change. Subdued, resigned, Papa's life, all our lives, took on a pattern that would hold for the duration of the war. Public shows of resentment pretty much spent themselves over the loyalty oath crisis. Shikata Ganai again became the motto. But under altered circumstances, what had to be endured was the climate, the confinement, the steady crumbling away of family life. But the camp itself had been made livable. The government provided for our physical needs. My parents and older brothers and sisters, like most of the internees, accepted their lot and did what they could to make the best of a bad situation. We're here, Woody would say. We're here, and there's no use moaning about it forever. Gardens had sprung up everywhere, in the fire breaks between the rows of barracks, rock gardens, vegetable gardens, cactus and flower gardens. People who lived in Owens Valley during the war still remember the flowers and lush greenery they could see from the highway as they drove past the main gate. The soil around Manzanar is alluvial and very rich. With water siphoned off from the Los Angeles-bound aqueduct, a large farm was under cultivation just outside the camp, providing the mess halls with lettuce, corn, tomatoes, eggplant, string beans, horseradish, and cucumbers. Near Block 28, some of the men who had been professional gardeners built a small park with mossy nooks, ponds, waterfalls, and curved wooden bridges. Sometimes in the evenings, we could walk down the raked gravel paths. You could face away from the barracks, look past a tiny rapids towards the darkening mountains, and for a while, not be a prisoner at all. You could hang suspended in some odd, almost lovely land you could not escape from, yet almost didn't want to leave. As the months at Manzanar turned to years, it became a world unto itself, with its own logic and familiar ways. In time, staying there seemed far simpler than moving once again to another unknown place. It was as if the war were forgotten, our reason for being there forgotten. The present, the little bit of busy work you had right in front of you, became the most urgent thing. In such a narrowed world, in order to survive, you learn to contain your rage and your despair, and you try to recreate as well as you can your normality, some sense of thing continuing. The fact that America had accused us, or excluded us, or imprisoned us, or whatever it might be called, did not change the kind of world we wanted. Most of us were born in this country. We had no other models. Those parks and gardens lent it an Oriental character. But in most ways, it was a totally equipped American small town, complete with schools, churches, Boy Scouts, beauty parlors, neighborhood gossip, fire and police departments, glee clubs, softball leagues, Abbott and Costello movies, tennis courts, and traveling shows. I still remember an Indian who turned up one Saturday billing himself as a Sioux chief, wearing bear claws and head feathers. In the fire break, he sang songs and danced his tribal dances while hundreds of us watched. In our family, while Papa puttered, Mama made her daily rounds to the mess halls, helping young mothers with their feeding, planning diets for the various ailments people suffered from. She wore bright yellow, long-billed sun hat she had made herself and always kept stiffly starched. Afternoons, I would see her coming from blocks away, heading home, her tiny figure warped by heat waves and that bonnet, a yellow flower wavering in the glare. In their disagreement over serving the country, Woody and Papa had struck a kind of compromise. Papa talked him out of volunteering. Woody waited for the army to induct him. Meanwhile, he clerked in the co-op general store. Keo, nearly 13 by this time, looked forward to the heavy winds. They moved the sand around and uncovered obsidian arrowheads he could sell to old men in camp for 50 cents apiece. Ray, a few years older, played in the six-man touch football league, sometimes against Caucasian teams, who would come in from Lone Pine or Independence. My sister Lillian was in high school and singing with a hillbilly band called the Sierra Stars. Jeans, cowboy hats, 2 guitars, and a tub bass. And my oldest brother, Bill, led a dance band called the Jive Bombers. Brass and rhythm with cardboard fold-out music stands lettered JB dances were held every weekend in one of the recreation halls. Bill played trumpet and took vocals on Glenn Miller arrangements of such tunes as In the Mood, String of Pearls, and Don't Fence Me In. He didn't sing Don't Fence Me In out of protest, as if trying quietly to mock the authorities. It just happened to be a hit song one year, and they all wanted to be an up-to-date American swing band. They would blast it out in recreation barracks full of bobby-socked, jitterbugging couples. Oh, give me land, lots of land, under starry skies above. Don't fence me in, let me ride through the wide, open country that I love. I'll have to find a version of that song for you so you can actually hear how it sounds. It's a whole lot better than what I just did. Pictures of the band in their bow ties and jackets appeared in the high school yearbook for 1943 through 1944, along with pictures of just about everything else in camp that year. It was called Our World. In its pages, you see school kids with armloads of books wearing cardigan sweaters and walking past rows of tar-papered shacks. You see chubby girl yell leaders, pom-poms flying as they leap with glee. You read about the school play called Growing Pains, the story of a typical American home, in this case, that of the McIntyres. They see their boy and girl tossed into the normal awkward growing up stage, but can offer little assistance or direction in their turbulent course. With Shoji Kaitayama as George McIntyre, Takuto Ando as Terry McIntyre, and Mrs. McIntyre played by Kazuko Nagai. Butchered those names, sorry. All the class pictures are in there, from the 7th grade through 12th, with individual headshots of seniors, their names followed by the names of the high schools they would have graduated from on the outside. Theodore Roosevelt, Thomas Jefferson, Herbert Hoover, Sacred Heart. You see pretty girls on bicycles, chicken yards full of fat pullets, patients back tilted in dental chairs, lines of laundry, and finally 2 large blow-ups, the first of a high tower with a searchlight against a Sierra backdrop. The next, a 2H end sheet showing a wide path that curves among rows of elm trees. White stones border the path. 2 dogs are following an old woman in gardening clothes as she strolls along. She is in the middle distance, small beneath the trees, beneath the snowy peaks. It is winter. All the elms are bare. The scene is both stark and comforting. This path leads toward one edge of camp, but the wire is out of sight or out of focus. The tiny woman seems very much at ease. She and her tiny dogs seem almost swallowed by the landscape or floating in it. And that's the end of chapter 12. Let's take a minute just to go back to the questions and make sure that we understand what was needed there. So remember, there were 5 questions here. The first one, manzanar in Spanish means apple orchard. How is this an empty promise for the internment camp residents? So think about what's offered here, and it is a turning point for them when they move closer to that part of the camp where they have the pears and they can have those things. But you know, what is it that they're missing? Okay, make sure we touch on that. We talked about the multicolored linoleum. What does that show us about the people? The fact that they're doing something different besides just rolling it out on the floor, that they're making these tiles, and they want people to look at it. What does this tell us about their lives and what's happening in the camp? How do Papa and Mama spend their time? So we had several descriptions within there of things that Papa's doing, what Mama's doing. They're a little different because Mama did take a job, Papa didn't. So Papa's got some pastimes. He's not just sitting around drinking anymore. What are some of those things that he's now doing with his free time versus Mama? What's her job? What's she doing? And with those pastimes, that's kind of his puttering. He's puttering around camp. And do you think he enjoys that the different activities that he's just kind of puttering around doing? What do you think? And then we get this ending where it you know, we have a yearbook, we have descriptions of the life there, and it almost seems normal, right? They put on a musical, they're graduating from high school, and these pictures that are shown in the yearbook. How is that semblance of real life, and yet how is it not too? All right, that's the end of today's lesson for chapter 12, which I think means lesson 12 as well. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you for the next lesson.